So again, good morning. Can you hear me? Can you see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes po, sir.
Okay,
Yes po.
so let me begin. Today we are going to discuss Chapter 4, Deontology of Ethics. So, of course, it was prepared by me, Levy Richard B. Isidro. So, good morning again. My name is Levy Richard B. Isidro, and I'll be discussing deontology. If you have any question, you can interrupt me anytime. Okay, so let's begin. So for the objective of this chapter, we have three objectives. So after reading this chapter, you should be able to, number one, discuss the basic principles of the deontology. Number two, apply the concepts of agency and autonomy to one's moral experience. And three is to evaluate actions using the universalisability of or universalisability test. Okay, so these are the chapter objectives. Um, are there anyone who are still entering? Okay, students are still entering the cluster session. Let me continue. Can you still see the PowerPoint presentation, guys?
Apo, sir.
Okay,
Yes
so
po.
to begin, the identifications of or determination determining the different objectives. Let's first have the sample story about the ontology. No, there is a story about the suitcase during the flag ceremony of the Monday morning, January 24, 2017. The mayor of Baguio City awarded a certificate from the city government that commended Regie Kabutuan. So, for his extraordinary show of honesty in the performance of their duties or practice of profession. So, Reggie was a taxi driver who, just 3 days before the awarding, drove his passenger, may dala-dala siyang passenger, so an Australian named Trent Shields to his workplace. So the foreigner, having a little sleep and was ill the previous day, left his suitcase inside the taxi cab. Then, after he reached his destination, the suitcase contained a laptop, passport, and an expensive pair of headphones, which Trent claimed amounted to around 260,000 pesos. So, yung Australian na yan, he left his suitcase, which amounting to 260,000 pesos. Consider closely the moment that when Reggie found that Trent had left a suitcase in his taxi cab. If he were to return the suitcase, there was no promise of an award from the city government of Baguio, and there was no promise of reward from the owner. So would he return the suitcase? What if he took the suitcase and sold its contents? Pwede naman niyang ibenta yon. So that could surely help him supplement his daily wages. Life as a taxi driver in the Philippines is not easy, so a little extra cash would go a long way to put food on the table, on to pay tuition fees for his children. So, pwede naman niyang hindi ibalik yung suitcase to the foreigner and just sell it, and then he can earn money that easily. Pero what did Reggie do? Ano ba yung ginawa ni Reggie? Of course, Reggie returned the suitcase without the promise of reward. Kaya nga siya na-commend na honest during the flag ceremony doon sa Baguio City by the mayor. So the question is, why? Why would Reggie return the suitcase knowing na there was no actually claiming for it since he left the Australian not knowing about the details of Reggie. So he could just run with it and sell it for a certain amount of money. And knowing that it's 260,000 pesos, kung ibebenta niya ng 100,000 pesos yun, that would be enough. Pero why would Reggie do that? Is it because of um, the promise of reward? but there was no promise of reward from the owner and from the city government. So why would a person do such thing? Siyempre, sasagot ng ilan sa atin ay kasi yun ang kailangan gawin. So ano ang sagot ni Reggie? So sabi ni Reggie, the main reason was it was right to return lost property to the rightful owner. And no matter how tempting it is to keep it for oneself. So it's a good reason. It's actually very virtuous reason. Kasi nga, di naman iyo, ibalik mo. Okay, so this is the main reason of Reggie. So to hold a moral conviction, meaning to say, kung meron kang handang panindigan na moral standard, means believing that it is one's duty to do the right thing. So when you are morally convicted with a certain principle of moral judgment, yes, of course, it is your duty to do the right thing. But how do you define duty? So what is duty? Why does one choose to follow her duty or his duty even if doing otherwise may bring her more benefits? Bakit susundin mo pa yung duty mo samantalang pwede ka naman mag-benefit even without doing the duty and opposing your duty itself or your obligation as your duty itself. So pwede ka naman mag-benefit nun. So why would a person follow his or her duty? Bakit kailangan niya sundin ang kanyang duty? Is it only because it's a moral conviction? Or is it only because it is the right thing to do? What if circumstances change? Paano kung nagbago yung mga circumstances natin? Like for example, your life at stake, other people's at stake, other people's lives at stake, or your family's life at stake. So would you dare to do your duty and let them, be compromised with the life and death question? So let's find out. We have these terms used in deontology, duty and agency. So deontology is actually a moral theory that evaluates actions that are done because of duty. So anything that is being judged based on duty, or any action that is judged based on duty as a moral standard, it is called deontology. So deontology is actually a principle of what is right and what is wrong based on duty. So the actions would be based upon the duty. So that's deontology. So if we are going to compare it with the utilitarianism is based on the consequences. So the greatest number of people. Pero kung titingnan naman natin is the natural law, it's based on the God's law. It's your principle of what is God, who is God, and then it's the basis is actually upon what is natural, okay, what is by nature or the laws of nature. So in the ontology, it is based on duty. The actions should be based on duty. So deontology comes from the Greek word deon, which means being necessary because it is actually a duty. Hence, deontology refers to the study of duty and obligation. So the main proponent of this was Immanuel Kant. He was a German Enlightenment philosopher who wrote one of the most important works of moral philosophy, and that was groundwork towards a metaphysics of morals. So in this work, Kant brings our attention to the fact that we, human beings, have the faculty called rational will. So take note of that. The ontology is basing its principle based on duty, but using rational will to identify the duty. So which is the capacity to act according to the principles that we determine for ourselves. Take note, yung mga keywords natin dyan are actually the principles that we determine for ourselves, and also your capacity to act o yung kakayahan mong mag-act na nakadepende doon sa principles na ikaw mismo ang nag-determine. So no external forces. Imagine no external forces. It's purely based on your rational will. So paano ba natin ma-identify of what is right and what is wrong using our rational will? So humans and animals are both sentient organisms. Of course, yes. And actually, human beings are on the top of the food chain. No? Pero what's the difference between animals and human beings? It's rationality. So human beings are capable of reasoning out why, diba? Why would you do that? Why why is it happening? You can reason out things, but the animals cannot because they live by instinct. So let's check rationality. Rationality consists of mental faculty, so therefore it works inside your mind to construct ideas. It's your mental faculty. It's your capability to think, to construct ideas and thoughts that are beyond our immediate surroundings. So meaning to say um, it is actually separated from the surroundings and the environment from external forces. It's within you, so you have the control per se without the influences of the external forces such as typhoon, such as earthquakes, or any external forces like jobs or works. So it's purely dependent on your mental faculty. That's what we call rationality. So this is the capacity for mental abstraction or some kind of meditation, some kind of thinking inside what's inside your mind, or deeply thinking about your ideas, which arises from the operations of the faculty of reasons. So if you are going to use your reason, no, if you are going to use your reason, you can actually create some abstractions, no, some constructions of ideas and thoughts, no, that uh, could be used to determine what is right and what is wrong. So rational will refers to the faculty to intervene in the world, to act in a manner that is consistent with our reason. So meaning to say you are having this rational will if you can use your faculty of reason to intervene to what's happening in the world, no, consistently using your reason, meaning you are consistently controlling what's happening, controlling what are the determinants of what is right and what is wrong, and it's separated from what's happening in the world kasi it's inside you, it's happening inside you. So that's rationality. Okay. It's not based on what's happening on the surroundings, but what's happening inside your mind because it's from your mental faculty. So you have this property of an agency. So what is an agency? It is your ability or the ability of a person to act based on her intentions and mental states. Why? Because of pure reason. Only human beings are the creatures who have reasons or reason. Okay. So therefore, you have this agency. You can act not based on the surroundings or the environment, not on the external forces, but based on your intentions or your mental states. So you have this agency if you have your own decisions, if you have your own um, ideas and using these ideas to act, okay? Because you have your intentions, you have your mental states. So as property of your rational will as an agency or a person as an agency, of course you should have this property also, this what we call autonomy. So Kant claims that property of rational will is autonomy. So for you to say that you have this rational will, you should have autonomy, which is the opposite, of course, of heteronomy. So these three Greek words are instructive: auto, heteros, and nomos, which means self. Auto means self, heteros means other, and law, respectively, comes from the Greek word nomos. So if you are going to mix or combine these words, therefore we can create the words heteronomy and the autonomy. So meaning to say, when we talk about autonomy, it means self-law or self-legislating. And heteronomy means other law. So it's not your law, but it's others' law. So take note of that. You have this rational will if you have the autonomy, because it's one of the properties of rational will. So autonomy is, excuse me, autonomy is having self law. Imagine, your mind is so powerful, our minds are so powerful that we can even self legislate. So, when we talk about self legislation, you are going to create your own law, to be convicted with it, to be subjected with it, and to be part of it. And you will enact this self law if you have finished rational reasoning, if this is right to be part of your principle. So, yung principle ni Reggie kanina, that's autonomy. Karapatan niya yan eh. He created that law and he subjected himself to that law. And what's that law? It's the right thing to do, to give to others what they really have, or it's not your property, so don't take it. So just give it to the rightful owner. So that's autonomy of the Reggie's rational will. So that's autonomy, no? So ang autonomy, if we are going to determine the autonomy of action, so yung adult brushing teeth because of personal hygiene. So nobody pushed him, nobody asked him, nobody commanded him to brush his teeth, but because of personal hygiene. And that personal hygiene was identified by his own pure reason or rational will. So it's his choice. It's what we call autonomy. On the other hand, when we say heteronomy, child who doesn't like to brush his teeth, of course, would not want to brush his teeth. Okay? So, but because of his mother, he would brush his teeth. Why? Because there is an external force. Excuse me. Therefore, it's the law of others, or others' law, or other law. Also, heteronomy. May force na nanggagaling sa labas. Pero itong autonomy kasi may sarili kang kusa. It's because of your reason. So that's the difference between autonomy and heteronomy. So yung autonomy process of creating your own law and enacting that law on your everyday life. So one, you should legislate the principle, or the legislation of principle. So you should create your own maxim. So maxim is a principle of life. It's how you live day by day. So number two is enacting of the principle. So therefore, if after you legislate the law itself, when we talk about legislation, you are creating a law. So after creating the law for yourself, you would enact it. You would practice it day by day. And that's what we call maxim. Okay, you can now create your own maxim. Convicted ka ron, ayaw mo talagang hindi ginagawa yon. So, day by day, ina-apply mo siya. So, autonomy process, number one, mag-legislate ka muna. Number two, enact mo na. So, Kant describes this as follows. So, the will does not only subject to the law, but it is also subject to the law in such a way that it gives the law itself, or self-legislating, and primarily just in this way that the will can be considered the author of the law under which it is subject. Take note, you are the subject to the law, and you are also subject to the law. So meaning to say, you are the author of the law and yet you will subject yourself to that law. Ikaw yung gumawa ng batas, tapos isa-subject mo pa yung sarili mo doon sa batas. And you would live with it all throughout your life. Okay? So that's what Kant describes, or that's how he describes the autonomy of the rational will. Okay? You are going to create the law. Of course, ikaw ang gumawa ng batas, and yet you will subject yourself with that law. So subject to the law, verb, be under the control of the law, and subject to the law, noun, the will of the law. So the will of the law comes from you, and then you will um, subject yourself or under yourself with the law. So how can the rational will be subordinate to that which is simultaneously its own authority figure? Napakahirap naman nun, di ba? You will subject yourself with that law and yet you are the authority figure kasi dadayahan mo yung sarili mo. Like for example, I just created this law in my mind that I should be honest all the time. Like for example, you created the law, no? The law for yourself and you said I should be honest all the time. Pero ikaw din ang mag-identify kung um ah, ikaw din ang magche-check kung nagagawa mo ba 'yon o hindi. So, pwedeng contradictory 'to. Isn't that contradictory to be subject to the law and yet also the authority figure itself? Yan yung tinatawag nating autonomy. Because every person has autonomy. So, Kant describes autonomy as the will that is subject to a principle or law, which you have created on your own also. So you are the subject of the law, or you're subject to the law, and yet the authority of the law. Kant claims the choice that can be determined by pure reason is called free choice. So you have free choice. That which is determination only by inclination, sensible impulse, stimulus would be animal choice. So that's arbitrium brutum. So beyond the free choice of individuals or people, arbitrium brutum. So ang human choice, in contrast, is a choice that may indeed be affected but not determined by impulses and therefore in itself not pure but nevertheless be determined to do actions from pure will. So meron tayong tinatawag na free choice. No, it's based on pure reason. But sometimes we are choosing to do what is an animal should do. Okay, so that's what we call animal choice. The animal choice is always based on sensible impulse stimulus, therefore coming from external forces. Ang tawag natin sa choice na nanggagaling sa mga external forces natin is arbitrium brutum. Like for example, if you can see a cake, if you and you really like that cake, it's your favorite, you're going to eat it without reason, without thinking. Ang tawag doon animal choice or arbitrium brutum. But if you are going to use your reason, no, hindi ka man gumamit ng pure reason, you would determine your action based on the pure will or your choice whether it is right to eat that cake or not. That's the difference between the animal and a person. Okay? So kung ikaw ay gagawa ng choice based on your instinct, that's instinct of the body. That's arbitrium brutum. So free choice, human beings, animal choice, of course, animals. Human beings can mediate within arbitrium brutum. Ang tao, he can choose. So like for example, if drugs are there, kung may droga dyan sa harapan mo, you can choose whether to use that or not to use that. But animals have the instinct to do it even without thinking. Diba? Pero ang tao, he can mediate. Kaya niya mamagitan doon at pag-isipan mabuti if that is right or wrong. Because you have free will, sabi nga ni ate. So what does it mean for a human to be affected but is not determined by sensible impulses? Take note, you can be affected by the surroundings or any external forces, and yet it is not the determinant for your action. So it implies that we are indeed basically animals, but we cannot be reduced to merely animality because the human person is not only an animal, but also rational. So we are going to think before we act, unlike animals who are just acting and not thinking. So we can thus make the conclusion that heteronomy of the will occurs when any foreign impulse, whether it is external, as in other persons, or institutions that impose their will on the agent, or sensible, as in bodily instincts or base emotions, is what compels a person to act. So sa heteronomy, ang nagpupush sa isang tao to act is una, of course, yung mga foreign impulses natin due to some people, due to some institutions, school, trabaho, etc. And sensible, excuse me, sensible impacts such as yung mga emotions natin, yung mga instinct natin to eat, to have sex, to have drugs, to have to have alcoholic beverages. So in contrast with that, autonomy is the property of the will in those instances where when pure reason is the cause of the action. So autonomy, walang pakialamanan to. It's sasabihin mo, okay, this is my principle in life. So I should live with it. I should die with it. So anytime, any circumstances, gagawin mo siya consistently because that is not based on external forces or sensible impacts but or influences, but you are autonomously acting based on your pure reason. So, but what consists in an action that is done by an autonomous will insofar as the cause of the action is pure reason? Paano natin masasabi that you are acting based on your autonomous will using your pure reason? What does it mean to act according to pure reason? Paano natin masasabi na tayo ay nag-act based on that pure reason? We have this universalisability test. Okay, medyo nakakabulol, di ba? Universalisability test. You need to check the universalizability of your action or your decision. So ano ba yon? May tinatawag tayong substantive moral theory and formal moral theory. Ang substantive moral theory, yan yung mga batas na sinusunod mo, excuse me, o binibase mo ang actions mo based on the commandments. Not only commandments but the existing laws na pinrovide na lang sa'yo kung ano ang dapat gawin, but you never had reason why would you follow that, no? You were just told to do that, and you were acting based on that. Ang tawag natin doon substantive moral theory. Ang example niyan, best example niyan is Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments, you are following the Ten Commandments, so that's substantive moral theory. Hindi ito galing sa'yo. It's not autonomously created by you, but there were certain laws existing just provided unto you, and then you were just following it. Ang tawag dyan ay substantive moral theory. Pero yung formal moral theory, there is a form given, but hindi ito nagpo-provide na kung ano ang dapat at hindi dapat gawin. Like for example, golden rule. Pag sinabi mong golden rule, wala naman yan nakalagay na bawal pumatay, bawal ang ganito, bawal ang magnakaw. And yet, you have certain things in mind, or these things are your basis of what is right and what is wrong. So next is categorical imperative. So therefore, ang categorical imperative is one of the formal moral theory. So ano ba yung categorical imperative? It's it's actually the basis of morality based on the autonomous will. So therefore, it is the principle of deontology. Okay? So i-check natin. Ano ba yung categorical imperative? Act only according to such a maxim by which you can at once will that it become a universal law. Gumawa ka ng maxim mo or yung principle mo autonomously it's your own principle. That's what we call maxim. Like for example, sabi mo, I should be honest all the time. So, kinrate mo siya sa mind mo. Then sabi mo, okay, I should follow this all the time. So, ginawa mo siya ngayong universal law. Ang tawag natin doon, categorical imperative. What's next? So, before I should have sex with a certain person, I should be married first. So, bago ako magpakasal, gusto ko muna, ay bago muna ako makipag-sex, I should be married first. Pakasal muna ako. So, not because of the commandments, not because of the Bible, but because you want to. So that's what we call maxim. And that maxim would live by you all the time and would remind you of choosing the right thing because it gives you the duty to do it, the obligation to do it because you just formulated it and you just said to yourself, I should do it. Okay? That's categorical imperative. So, four key elements of in formulation of categorical imperative. Una, action. You should identify the actions. Ano bang gagawin mo? But before doing the action, you should know your maxim. Ito yung rule that we live by in day-to-day lives, di ba? Yung will mo, it's your choice. Universal law, maxim that becomes universal law. It becomes the universal law after making or creating the maxim. So identify the action, identify the maxim, identify your will, your free choice, and then universal law. That's categorical imperative. Okay. So if I were you on how to do this, if you have any question in mind on how to do the categorical imperative, first you should create your maxim and then consider all the actions and then choose based on that maxim and make it the universal law. So that's categorical imperative. So kung ikaw gusto mong maging someone very autonomous, you can now create your own principle of what is right and what is wrong. That could be subjectively opposing the institutions like schools, your family, like your friends, like any other people in the world. They could just oppose you. But if it's your own maxim, no one can stop you to do that. No one can stop you to determine what is right and what is wrong based on your maxim because you have this rational will. That's deontology. So false promises, bawal yon. No, sabi mo, I would do this, I would do this, and yet you are not consistent to do that. That's what we call futile pretense. Pagpapanggap lang yan, hindi totoong maxim yan. Hindi ka nananaginip ka lang that you are using categorical imperative kasi hindi mo kayang panindigan every day. No, so that's false promises. So ang pure reason natin, it should be under the principle of prescriptivity. So practice what you preach, universalisability, make similar evaluations about similar cases. So therefore be consistent on the cases the same with the cases that happened to you last time and make a decision the same with the decisions you made last time. Rationality, be consistent. Your ends means to achieve an end, do the necessary means. You just created the ends. Of course, you just created the means that's based on pure reason. So, eto lang ang problema with deontology. There are limitations. And every principle of ethics naman may limitations. Ito yon. If you're going to, uh, if you will be in this situation that you might kill one and save five, or you might kill five and save one, what would be your choice? What kind of maxim is applicable to this kind of situation? So, tatanungin ko kayo dyan. So, thank you for listening. I'll end the recording and then ask questions about it. It's 7:37 pa lang. So, I already discussed the ontology for 30 minutes. I think that's good enough. Do you have any question about that, about the ontology, guys? If you would be asked, like for example, you would be in this situation. Again, I'll share my screen and look at the question. It's very important, guys. You know why? Because if you would be put in this situation, what would you do? You should think about it in your coffee time, in your night time, in your meditation time. You should think about it because we are human beings and we are not very sure of what's going to happen today and the next day here. If you would be asked, what would you do? Can you still see the PowerPoint presentation? I ended it a
Yes,
while
sir.
ago. Okay, I
Yes po,
restored it
sir.
already. Now, here's the question. Would you kill one to save five? Anyone? Would you kill one to save five? Or would you rather kill five and save one? Or it depends. What's your choice? We still have time. Anyone?
Sir.
Yes, sino po yan? You can just open your mic po and hindi ko makita kasi.
Um, Hello po, sir. Good morning po.
Morning. Yes po,
My
ano
name
name mo, ma'am?
is Shane Nicaela Castillo po from 1BSA to ABM.
Yes, ma'am. Go on, ma'am. Ano pong tanong natin?
Um, I don't have questions po, but I have the answers for my reasons here from the question itself.
Okay.
For me, sir, it depends po for what kind of person or kung gaano ka important sa akin yung tao
Mhm.
na isi-save ko. Kahit na isa lang yung dapat iligtas or yung isang tao na yun ang dapat i-sacrifice, it
Mhm.
depends on my relationship towards to that person. If
Mhm.
if kasi nag-aatwig yung relationship ko or yung connection ko towards to that person, I'll
Mhm.
save I'll save him or her kahit na mag-isa lang po siya. But in this situation,
Mhm.
if there's no relationship and ties, I think for me, for my own reason, um, it applies to
Mhm.
utilitarianism rather,
Mhm.
um, because it as it gives to the law of the self, which limits or hinders the principles of deontology.
Mhm.
Um, you can save because life is for me kasi life is powerful even though it's just once itself.
Mhm.
Kasi um without those connections, you can still able to do what is right kahit
Mhm.
na sabihin mo na it's um something not behind your moral principles eh. Kasi po
Mhm.
for me may mga pagkakataon na kailangan mong gawin yung isang you have point in your life na kailangan mo mag-sacrifice para ma-save yung mas maraming tao. Because
Mhm.
the more the life is being saved, the more na
Mhm.
mas parang um, mas nababalyo mo yung existence ng life. And
Mhm.
without further that relations,
Mhm.
mas mainam na lang din na kahit na papaano, kahit na may masakripisyong iba, at least kahit papaano mayroon kang masi-save pa rin kasi yun naman po yung mas mahalaga, yung may ma-save ka
Mhm.
pa rin without that, at the end of that day may masi-save ka pa rin at mas mainam na mas madami yun kasi the more na mas
Oo.
maraming effect yon sa madami. That's why I think it applies to utilitarianism rather than deontology. That's
Mhm.
why it was called a limitation ng deontology.
Mhm.
Thank you po, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Ano na nga ulit pangalan mo, ma'am?
Shane pa.
Shane, si Ma'am Shane. Thank you, Ma'am Shane.
Thank you po.
Yes, somehow kasi when we talk about deontology, it is a duty to save life. Now, like for example, um, kung kikreate ka kasi ng principle mo of what is right and what is wrong or your maxim, of course, more or less, one of those would be like, I should not kill. But there are dilemmas. There will be situation whereas you would choose, of course, lesser evil. Lesser evil ibig sabihin, you would kill and yet the only question would be how many. So it would be a dilemma. Mapapadpad ka sa question ng dilemma. Like for example, sabi mo, I should be honest. I should be honest. I should not tell any lies. Tapos biglang dumating ngayon sa point na yun lang yung bata, 'di ba? Sasabihin ng nanay, "Nak, sabihin mo sa maniningil, wala ako." Oh, well, if you are going to use the maxim of I should not lie, yung pala maniningil napakadelikado pala ng sitwasyon ng nanay mo or any person na like for example, mamamatay pag tinuro mo. Dilemma 'yon. Kasi puwedeng dalawang maxims mo tatamaan nila yung isa't isa. Like for example, I should not kill. I should be honest. There will come a time in your life that you would be put in a situation of dilemma to choose between honesty and not killing. That's the limitation of deontology. So pag magke-create ka ng maxim mo, you should create a maxim that you could do consistently, no? Consistently. Anyway, so 'yan yung sinasabi natin na every principle of morality or standard of morality or every theory of morality like utilitarianism, natural law, and now this time deontology, there is a loophole, no? Each loophole could be fixed or could be fill up by a certain standard or theory of ethics again. So, of course, in deontology, it is a dilemma, but when it comes to utilitarianism, it is very clear that the answer should be the five, not the one. So you can use utilitarianism anytime, no? Sometimes you need to break deontology. Sometimes you need to break utilitarianism. Sometimes you need to break natural law. And you cannot consistently use those three na parang napaka-absolute nila. Like for example, utilitarian ako. Oh, hindi ibig sabihin na utilitarian ka, you can use utilitarianism all the time. It would make you uh, um, think, uh, ang tawag dito, it could make you frustrated because of a certain dilemma that you would experience. Baka ma-experience mo yung dilemma because of that, no? Any question pa? Kasi kung wala ng tanong, I could stop sharing and
Sir, may tanong po.
yes po, Sir Gino.
Sige po. Puwede rin po ba nating i-apply yung principle of double effect? Mag-same lang po
I
ba ang result na yung 5 people po yung mase-save kapag yung principle of double effect po ni Thomas Aquinas yung in-apply?
yes, because one of the limitations of Thomas Aquinas' natural law is the double effect. Kasi it's already a dilemma. Any choice kasi is wrong. So ang sabi ng double effect, you should choose the lesser evil, di ba? Yung may immediate yung may immediate um, applicability of the immediate yung immediate effect of goodness, hindi yung evilness or yung wrongful yung pangit na epekto. Pero yes, of course, pero still it is a limitation of natural law kasi you still killed, 'di ba? Palagay ko utilitarianism ang best diyan. Do you get that, Sir Gino?
Yes, sir, naintindihan.
Pero puwede rin naman na mali ang utilitarianism. Baka naman pag-save mo ng 5, yung 5 pala na yun papatay ng 10, 'di ba? Hindi natin sure. And we cannot even know because we are human beings, part of this big world, 'di ba? We do not know what should happen in the first place for the future. Like for example, if there would be a World War III, why would Putin put himself in a war, no? Or Russia put in a war and then justifying the war because of the national interest, no? And millions of people will die and millions of people are actually dying. Why would he choose that? Maybe because of duty. So deontologically, maybe Putin is using the war to justify or to actually answer the call of Maxim. Yun lang, baka Maxim niya yun, hindi natin alam because autonomous lang siya. So everybody is autonomous to create his own law. Self-legislation. And thank you for listening, guys. Wala na po tayong tanong. We can end the the cluster session.
Wala na po.
Okay. So, thank you so much for listening, guys, and see you next meeting. See you next time. Bye-bye. Ingat. God bless.
Thank you po, sir.
Thank
Bye
you
po.
po, sir. Bye.